Hi, my name is Damien Brugos, and I'm here with one of the conductor for University of Pacific, University Symphonic Orchestra, Miss Kalena Bovell. How are you, Miss Kalena?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I guess we'll start with how was your experience in University of Pacific so far?
It's been really great. I mean, the students are absolutely lovely, and then I've been able to meet some of the faculty members and work with their students as well. And it's just really fantastic to see how much support exists on this campus, especially for music and the music program. And yeah, so no, I've been having a really fantastic time.
Nice. So one of the things I found out is that you play the violin,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that you play like various orchestra, mostly in Los Angeles and New England. When you conduct or listening to the piece, do you always feel like inspired to play the violin yourself, like being part of a band?
Oh, that's a good question. So not really,
Not really.
not anymore. So I mean, I haven't seriously played violin. I think going on maybe 5 years now.
Oh, okay.
Because basically, when you decide to conduct, you're either pretty much giving your all to one thing, or you're mediocre at two things,
Hmm.
right? And so I pretty much had to make a choice. So it was like I'm either going to go all in for conducting, or I'm going to try to balance the two. And I did try to balance the two for at least 2 years, and it just did not work out. So yeah, no. Since I really started pursuing conducting seriously, I haven't been able to play my violin like I used to.
Okay, so you wouldn't consider yourself doing like a private lesson with one of the students, or like
So I could definitely still teach a private lesson, but in terms of my playing facility, it's not what it used to be. I mean, because I went from practicing 5 hours a day to maybe practicing 5 hours a year.
okay. So moving on to one of the pieces that you will be conducting, Gabriella Lena Frank, which her chamber will be featured on Wednesday, Friday the 21st. So Allegia Adina was dedicated to her brother and come from like a multicultural heritage. So how does it feel to be one of the conductors to bring this piece to life?
Oh, so I was really excited about this piece. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Gabriela. I think her music is quite fantastic. And this piece was the first piece that she wrote when she was in her doctoral program at University of Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And so there's something that's so accessible about it. And it's what's also really cool is that even though she had pretty much already established her compositional voice, it was kind of cool to see where that started. And with this piece, like you said, it's an homage to her culture because she comes from a multicultural background. And so it's also an homage to, it's an Andean elegy, Elegia Andina. And so to just be able to kind of put all of that together and to explore what those sonic colors are and what that sound world is, it's been a treat.
Yeah. So knowing that Gabriella is mixed race and you come from an African American and Hispanic background, myself included, actually.
Okay.
Do you feel like an increased connection while conducting to her music?
That's a good question. I try to find a connection to every piece that I conduct. And I think that one helps you be a better conductor because you're able to relate to the piece. And at the end of the day, you also have to like what you're conducting. So for me, the way that I try to do that is to find something that really inspires me about the piece. And so, what I honestly love about this piece is just kind of, again, just the sounds that she's able to produce and the colors that she's able to get. Just the pacing of everything. And there's this like really cool midsection that has some mixed meter stuff, and it's like the strings almost sound like they're playing Stravinsky Rite of Spring because yum bum 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 bum. So I was just like, oh, that's basically heavy metal. Like I'm a huge metalhead.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so the fact that I was just able to lock into that just made me love the piece even more. So yeah, I always try to find something to really kind of grab onto.
Yeah, it's really funny because I've always been a fan of like a mix between like symphonic and also like metal genre. So I'm definitely looking forward for this piece.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely like it.
So on August 24, 2001, you led the Chineke, is that correct?
Yes, Chineke.
Chineke Orchestra at the BBC Prom as you performed not only Corliss Taylor Symphony No. 1 in A minor, but also Hiawatha Overture. So can you describe me what is that like during that experience?
Oh, I mean, the prom is like the epitome for every conductor. and I think for me, especially for many American conductors, we don't grow up with the prom culture, as it's such an event in Europe. And so to be able to conduct the prom with Chineke Orchestra, an orchestra that I have loved since their inception, and then to also conduct a program of all works by composers of color, because you had Fela Shawande, Florence Price, and then the two Coleridge Taylor pieces bookended it. And so, no, it was absolutely a dream, and I would love to be able to conduct the prom again.
Nice. Can you recall, how were you introduced to Simon Coleridge Taylor's work?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think about this for a sec.
Yeah.
I think it was Chineke, actually.
Okay.
Because I remember, I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago now. I remember, there was the whole press release of here's this orchestra in Europe, predominantly African American players and performers, and then their inaugural concert included Samuel Coleridge Taylor's Ballade in A minor. And I remember hearing that piece and thinking, who is Samuel Coleridge Taylor? and just kind of being like, oh, but this music is really great. Like, how come I've never heard of him?
Right.
And so ever since listening to that ballade, I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to conduct this piece one day. And it's a piece that I try to do often because I really do love it. And I'm such a fan of his music, and so I try to program his pieces whenever I can.
Okay. So Chineke is one of the inspiration to evolve your interest in Simon Coleridge Taylor.
Most definitely.
Nice. So I managed to find one of your interviews in Civic Orchestra in New Haven.
Okay.
And I noticed when you were talking about Taylor's Ballade in A minor, you mentioned that he put in Afrocentric, but also a romantical style. So whether you talk to people who may or may not have a musical background, how would you describe Symphony No. 1 in A minor?
Oh, that's a good question. So he wrote this piece when he was 23 years old. He was still a student at the Royal College of Music. And firstly, you're like, what was I doing when I was 23? Definitely not composing music, right? But you start to see his musical genius from the standpoint of this piece kind of goes between two different meters or two different tempi, right? And the way he juxtaposes them, it happens so seamlessly. And with this piece especially, there's kind of this underlying current of we don't really know where we're going yet. We don't really know what we're building to. And as soon as the whole orchestra comes in, it's kind of like this bombastic, in-your-face, aha, here we are. And he gives us this really fantastic, lush melodies that Coleridge Taylor is known for. We hear it first in the violas. We also hear it in the clarinets. The horn will also take the melody. And, he was also, what's the word? A contemporary of Dvorak.
Okay.
And in that, there are many sections within this piece that sound like Dvorak could have written them as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah, and so, the second movement is this beautiful larghetto that is absolutely glorious. And it's basically a theme that passes throughout the orchestra. And eventually, at the end, the entire orchestra plays it.
Okay.
And it ends with a violin solo who plays basically a couple of bars of just beautiful melody that's kind of taking that melody that you heard and just kind of slightly playing with it and manipulating it. And then the work ends very softly.
Nice.
Third movement to me is almost like we're in the countryside. It starts off just kind of very, again, mistidioso, like what exactly is going on?
All right.
And then we have oboe and clarinet that just kind of takes this theme, and the way that he kind of uses this theme, it's very playful, it's very fun, it's very joyous, and then we have this beautiful trio that goes in 5/4 meter, and again, it gives us this sound of just lushness and warmth, and eventually we go back into the opening section that we heard, and the piece ends. And the fourth movement I absolutely love. So in my score and in the musician's parts, it's listed as 4C. And it's because he wrote the fourth movement 3 times.
Oh, okay.
He never thought the first 2 iterations were good enough. And even with the third iteration, he still wasn't convinced that this was his absolute best work. And so for me, the fourth movement is almost like imposter syndrome. We hear someone really kind of questioning, am I good enough to do this? Is this music worthy? And then we have a very short development section where he just kind of develops themes from the beginning. It's all of 16 measures, which is very short for any symphony. And then the cello come back in with the main theme that we hear from the beginning. And it's very hesitant and it's very subdued. And it's, for me, it's kind of Coleridge Taylor saying, I'm not meant to be here. And then once that you hear the violins come in, then he says, actually, no, just kidding, I am. And, you know, the work ends very softly. It's very reminiscent of a Brahms Third Symphony. So again, we have this big bombastic sound, and then the work just kind of comes to a very soft, serene close. And I think that's the composer just sitting with himself in the quiet and reflecting.
Okay. Yeah, I really like how it's really interesting that there are some conductors, even back then, or maybe even now, that they probably was looking at the piece, listening, and they feel like there was not, it wasn't good enough. And then, but let's say someone managed to pop up. The first thing I mentioned was, I think of is Chopin, Fantasy. And then next thing you know, everyone seems to love it. So yeah, it's really interesting that at this point, for someone who is like a composer or like composing, it will help. I think it should be like, just risk it all. Just take a risk. And who knows, maybe some people might love it as you thought it would.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing to remember is that these composers were all human.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think it's very easy for us as musician conductors people to put them on this pedestal and forget that they struggled too. They had their own issues as well. And I think that's what I love about this piece so much, is that you really do see his journey of finding his voice, you know. And so because, you know, I've conducted his pieces later in his life as well, again, I got a sense of what that voice became. So to see him finding that voice and to see him finding who he is, I mean, I absolutely love that journey.
Yeah, that's definitely a beautiful journey. So in the first piece, when you're conducting Toast of Town Overture, Quinn Mason is known as a young composer, especially started composing when he was 10. I felt that crazy. And performed over 160 performed orchestras in the U.S. and Europe. So I'm curious, did you manage to interact or work with him? And how does it feel to be able to conduct the piece for the university?
Yeah, no, so Quinn and I are actually really good friends.
Okay.
Quinn and I met 2 years ago when Memphis Symphony was conducting one of his pieces. And Quinn actually tries to go to each orchestra that's doing his piece. And so, you know, he and I got along very well, and we've stayed in touch. And, you know, I remember just kind of saying, Quinn, you know, I was conducting the Memphis Youth Symphony at the time, and I said, you know, which of your pieces do you think is most accessible for youth ensemble? And he said, dude, you should check out, you know, this piece I just wrote, Toast of the Town Overture. I said, okay. And I listened to it, I thought, oh, you know, this is really fun. Like, it's just really cute, you know? And it was really accessible for the group. And once I kind of heard the story behind it, I was like, yeah, this totally fits, you know? So basically, Quinn decided one day, what happens if I write an overture to an opera that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
And that was this piece, you know? And I love the fact that I get to do it with the UOP Symphony, simply because it kind of opens the sonic world of, you're in for a ride, you know? Like, this piece, it's fun, it's joyous, it's fast, it just kind of, it cooks. You know, and so to kind of bring people into this world of, this is what we have for you today, I think it's the perfect opener.
Yeah, it's funny how you mentioned that. Yeah, because he does describe it as like a fun and festive overture, and also in a style like comparable to Gilbert Sullivan and Offenbach.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself like have interest in these composer, or like are you a fan of them?
Of the musical theater composers or the musical composers?
Yeah.
So I was never a huge musical theater person, and that's only because I was introduced to it very late in my life. And same for musicals, but I have an appreciation for them, you know, because I feel like you can't move forward unless you know your history. So unless you know what those guys and what those women did for that genre, you can't really know the music that you're studying, you know. So I have an appreciation for them, and I try to expose myself to them often.
Oh, nice. Um, so, like how you describe Taylor's ballad,
Mm-hmm.
what do you expect the audience to connect with? Pretty much any kind of those pieces that will be presented tomorrow.
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like that's a difficult question. And I think whenever I program a concert, I want people usually to leave with three things.
Mm-hmm.
I want an audience member to leave inspired, to leave curious, to listen to more, or to
Mm-hmm.
want to hear more, and just leave having some type of experience, whatever that may have been for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that Gabriela Lina Frank's piece is definitely going to take people on a sonic journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an elegy, and so
Right.
it's very slow, it's lush, and I mean it kind of it can what's the word, transport you
Mm-hmm.
to emotional places that maybe you never would have expected. Whereas Quinn's piece, it's fun, it's joyous, and I think people will have a really good time with that piece. Whereas with the Coleridge Taylor, I mean, there's so many different emotions that one can feel,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would just hope that people leave having an experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Um, so getting to know about your journey, what made you interested in music in general, especially like conducting?
So everything in my musical life was by accident.
Oh.
Yeah. So I accidentally discovered I could sing when I was 9. It was because the choir teacher went around to all the classrooms and
Oh,
did
yeah.
the musical aptitude test. It's like sing these pitches, tap these rhythms, and I was musically inclined. And honestly, before that, I had no idea, because whenever a song came on the radio, I never tried to match pitch, or I never tried to plunk out on a keyboard or anything.
Mhm.
We also didn't own a keyboard. So it was after the choir teacher said, "Okay, hey, you can sing." I was like, "Wow, really? Okay." But then all of a sudden, like, music became it.
Mhm.
Like, I just became so obsessed with it and was doing music all the time. My parents bought me a keyboard from Radio Shack, which no longer exists, but I still have this keyboard in my office.
Oh.
And so I thought I was going to be a singer. My friends and I in elementary school, we started a singing group, and we wrote our own songs and designed our own choreography. And it was like, yeah, we thought this was it. And then when I got to middle school, they accidentally put me into a beginning strings class as opposed to choir.
Oh.
And because the choir didn't fit in my schedule.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know anything about the string family, orchestras, and it was kind of like, I don't belong. And so the teacher asked me what I wanted to play. No idea. So I was just like, I want to play the flute. And he called me an idiot and was like, go get a violin. I was like, okay. So I got this violin, and again, it's the first couple weeks is learning how to take it out of the case and clean it and hold it properly without damaging it. And once we finally basically put bow to string, I was like, yeah, I really like this. Like, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I have a physical body that was prone to injuries. So I was always developed tendonitis and had kind of mild carpal tunnel, and all of that is fine now.
Mhm.
And when I got to college, I said, well, I'm going to merge my two loves. I love teaching and I love playing. So I went into music education. And then we all had to take a year of instrumental conducting. And it was after I took that course that it was kind of like, yeah, I love violin, but there's something about this that I just can't shake.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I've been conducting ever since. And that's kind of how I got into it. Lovely, happy accident.
Oh, nice. So if you haven't think about like music or singing or conducting, what do you see yourself doing outside?
Oh, if I wasn't a musician, I totally would have gone into psychology.
Psychology.
Yeah, I think, pardon me, I find just the human psyche so fascinating. I find human beings so fascinating. And just kind of that whole world has always been interesting to me. And I also feel like as a musician and conductor, you are a psychologist to a degree. I mean, you have to know how to read the room. You have to know how to say things to a person so that they don't take it in a wrong way or in a negative way. And so there is a lot of psychology involved. And I also taught. And so you also need that psychology of how to manage children and manage students, So, yeah, I definitely would have gone in psychology.
It's funny because I remember if I didn't think about becoming a musician or becoming an author. I've always have high interest in doing psychology,
Oh, nice.
so I completely relate to you on that.
Yeah.
I always love studying some minds and different perspectives.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Um, so knowing that you've been in Chapman University, what was your personal experience in there?
You know, Chapman was a good school for where I was in my life. You know, so I was the older graduate because I went to Santa Monica College first. I did 3 years there, and then I transferred. And because I came to violin so late, so I was 7 years self-taught. And so I didn't actually have my first private lesson until I was 18. And so I didn't know much about music schools, what to expect, what to look for. And so once Chapman, again, another happy accident, just kind of fell into my lap. You know, it was the right school for where I was because I was definitely supported when it came to my violin lessons, when it came to the music curriculum, and I met some of my closest friends at that school. And Chapman was also where I started conducting, you know, and even though I was a music ed major with a violin emphasis, they allowed me to explore this other side of interest that I had. And so, you know, who knows where life would, maybe where I would have ended up had I not gone to that school. But yeah, that school is the reason why I conduct.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, you transferred to Hart School, is that correct?
No, so I didn't transfer. So I graduated from Chapman in '08 with my bachelor's.
Okay.
And then I also have a teaching certification in that school as well. And then I went to grad school at University of Hartford.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
At Hartford, I have a master's in conducting and then a graduate professional diploma in conducting.
okay, and so knowing that you transferred, you went to Hart School. Do you feel like when you're around people, do you feel more connected since you guys have like high interest in music as well?
That's a good question. You know, not always. And I think that's because I have so many other interests outside of music. You know, like it's important to me to find friends outside of the music circle because music is what I do for my job, and I love it. But I have so many other interests, and I think it's important that as a classical musician, you can talk about other things outside of classical music. You know, so it's like I love reading, I love poetry, I love weightlifting, I love baking. I'm a huge death metal head. So I connect with people on those levels in addition to being a classical musician, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and funny thing, I remember was about to ask you a couple of things that you basically answer is that I know that you are a poet. What makes you have a high interest in poetry, and when did that come out?
Oh, so that's a long story that I will truncate for you. So basically, I hated poetry. Did not like reading it. I was never a person that loved trying to figure out what someone was trying to say. Like, just tell me what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so basically, between the ages of 19 and 24, I battled depression for 5 years. And poetry for me was a way of being able to say everything on paper that I couldn't say verbally.
Okay.
You know? And so, yeah, my book was written over the course of 5 years, and it's basically my journey through hell and back. And so, yeah.
Okay, and I recall one of your poem is called "Dear Soul." Can you explain what's that about?
Yeah, no. So there's actually have two. So my book is called Dear Soul, and then I actually have a poem that'll be featured in the second book whenever that book comes out, also called Dear Soul. But Dear Soul was basically my approach to writing. It was kind of like me writing whenever I was writing these poems. It was kind of my inner voice writing to my soul, you know, because I often tell people I wear my soul on my sleeve, and it's that soul that comes out in my poems.
Okay, yeah. So in other words, we'll expect more poems from you in the future.
Most definitely. Yeah, I just need stuff to go wrong because life has been really good that I have nothing to write about.
So you do it like more, definitely more on like personal experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, the greatest art comes from struggle.
So can you give more details on like your basic day off and like music in general?
Yeah, so whenever I do have a day off, which is very far and few in between, no, you know, so I love working out. Like, I've always been kind of a health and fitness enthusiast and just a health and fit nut. So I love weight training. I'm totally just gotten back into Pilates. So I try to strength train 3 to 4 days a week, do Pilates at least once a week. I love discovering coffee shops. Even though I'm not a coffee drinker, it's like I'm more like I like my milk with a splash of coffee type of person. But I love just discovering, coffee shops in Memphis or wherever it is I happen to be traveling. I'm a huge foodie, so I love baking. I love trying new recipes. And then just hanging out with my friends. I also live around the corner from a park in Memphis. So when the weather is nice, I'll go grab a coffee or a tea, and I'll just go to the park, sit on a bench, and just look out in the nature.
Okay, nice. So definitely more like a nature kind of persona.
Yeah, so to speak. I mean, I'm not like a huge camper or hiker. It's like if I do that, I need like upscale, like we're staying in a hotel type of camping. You know what I mean? Like glamping, I guess as they call it, glamour camping. But no, I just love being around trees and being around grass and leaves. It's kind of my way of reminding myself that I'm here, I'm being. So yeah, I can sit looking at nature for hours.
And I remember talking to one of my colleagues, and who happens to be in the orchestra class as well. I remember she mentioned that you've been traveling all over the place, and I believe you recently went from London. Is that correct, or like very recently?
In October of 23, I was in Switzerland, and then let me see if I can actually remember this. So I was in Switzerland, and then in November I was in Minnesota, followed by a stint in LA. I was also in Memphis in November as well. December was LA. December was also in Hamilton, Ontario. And so recently, before coming to UOP, I was in Oakland, California to guest conduct the Oakland Symphony. And then a week prior to that, I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee to guest conduct the Chattanooga Symphony. And so here I am now.
Wow, how do you do that? Honestly,
it's hard. It's a lot, and especially because I feel like if I were 10 years younger, totally would not mind all the traveling. But 10 years older, the 5 a.m. wake ups get a little bit more, a little tougher. But I love what I do. And, because what I do brings me to different people, and exposes me to different music and repertoire and just, different communities. And so how do I do it? I make sure to take care of myself while I'm on the road. Tons of sleep, tons of water, make sure I'm eating, a well-balanced, nutritious meal. But yeah, I do it because I love what I do.
Definitely. I think that's one way to like inspire from all the craziness, definitely. So curious, once you completed tomorrow Symphonic Orchestra, what's next on your goal?
So what's next for me is I take 2 weeks off.
Okay.
Which I am very much looking forward to. And I say 2 weeks off with caveat of I still have work to do. But I'm building in days off to just kind of decompress, unwind, process. My birthday is also next Thursday, so, I'm also just going to have a good time as I kind of go around the sun one more time. But, yeah, what's next for me is at the end of February, I am conducting the International Contemporary Ensemble, also known as ICE. And then from there, I go to Louisiana Philharmonic, followed by a stint with the Louisville Orchestra. And then I go to LA to do something with the Prelude Strings organization, which is an organization I used to work with when I was still playing violin. And that organization also gave me my start as a conductor as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then followed by that, I'm back home in Memphis for about 2 weeks, and then I dip off again. So life stays busy.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed is that I remember in one of your interviews, I forgot what it took place. You mentioned that you traveled in Canada, and you were technically the first Black woman.
Yes.
So knowing that, like, your experience, sometimes like new journey can have like shocking facts. Is there something else that relates to journey that you couldn't believe?
Well, it's kind of, how do I answer this question? The thing that still gets me is how many firsts we're still having.
Yeah.
In what was 2023 and now 2024. But at the same time, it's also amazing that we're still having firsts, So yeah, so I conducted a reimagined version of Scott Joplin's Treemonisha this past summer in Toronto, and I was the first Black woman in Canadian opera history to conduct an opera. So I'm just like, listen, I'm a Jeopardy question now. We just need to get that question on Jeopardy so people can say my name. I'm just saying, right? But yeah, I mean, also, I believe I'm still, I'm African American Latina conductor, and there still aren't that many of us in the field. And the numbers are growing very slowly, and I know there are other women that exist, but so far I'm the person that has a platform.
Yeah.
So again, the needles for these things are moving, but they're just moving still very slowly.
And would you say that will this help you inspire other people who are like you to basically do what their interests, especially like for those who are interested in conducting?
I mean, I would hope so. It's like I say often that representation matters,
Right.
and that people can't be what they can't see. And I would hope that either people that I work with are inspired, or anyone who comes to a concert is inspired, or I would hope that people who look like me are able to see the possibilities that they couldn't see before.
Definitely.
Because for me, coming up as a classical musician, there was Regina Carter, who played jazz violin. I didn't play jazz, so I never saw a Black violinist who played classically. And just like as I started conducting, I wasn't aware of many Black conductors. I mean, there was James DePries, who I believe had already passed away by the time I became interested. There was Calvin Simmons, who was the conductor of the Oakland Symphony back in the 80s, I believe, who passed away when he was very young. And then there was Michael Morgan, who I did not become aware of until maybe 5 years after I started conducting. So yeah, I always hope that people see me or encounter my work and just become inspired to just try.
Definitely, so we could evolve in the future. I forgot to mention. Do you also happen to meet Gabriella Lena Frank?
So I've not met her. I know her via social media. I follow her, like, huge super fan, but I've not met her in person yet.
Okay. Were you looking forward for it?
Oh, definitely. No, definitely. Definitely looking forward to that. Yeah.
Definitely. And so, I think we can wrap things up. So, just a couple more questions. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to have a same career as you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'll answer this one in two different ways.
Okay.
It's what advice I would give, and then what I would also tell my younger self, if I were giving my younger self advice. And so, kind of three things I would tell my younger self when I was just starting is don't sweat the small stuff. That this life is much bigger than you are, so enjoy the process. Don't worry so much about the trajectory. And the days that you don't feel like doing it, that's totally fine. And so what I would tell to someone who would like to conduct or start conducting is, one, be in love with the process. Because a lot of what I do is spent at a desk studying. I often study 5 to 6 hours a day, depending on what I have on my plate. And sometimes that's a drag. It's like you don't really want to sit at a desk. So you have to really become in love with the process. Two is to surround yourself with a really fantastic support system. Because it's those people that are going to keep you grounded, those people that are going to keep you honest. And it's those people that are also going to inspire you and give you that drive that you need to keep pushing forward. And I think the last thing I would tell someone is go out and have experiences. Meaning, yes, sometimes you need to put in the hours, you need to put in the time, but it's also important to go see your friends, to go to the park, to go to the theater, go to a concert, because if you're not living life, then you can't pour into your musical life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are beautiful advices. I really appreciated that. Well, I'm so looking forward for tomorrow, and hope I wish nothing but best for you and your future.
Thank you.
And so, what's your? Can you give out your social media so we could?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, Silver Smile. So it's spelled a little bit different. It's Silver Silvur.
Okay.
Smiles is all one word. On Facebook, you can follow my professional page, which is Kalena Bovell Conductor. And then I'm not on X, formerly known as Twitter, just because I couldn't figure out what my niche on Twitter was going to be. So those are the two. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time. And like I said, wish nothing but best for your future.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.